A man secretly slipped poison into his wife's drink, casually handing it to her with a forced smile. After making excuses to dodge her invitation to toast together, he quickly found a reason to leave, watching from afar as his wife drank every drop of the deadly cocktail. The poison was completely odorless and would stop the heart within 8 hours without leaving a trace. All symptoms would appear identical to a heart attack. Sure enough, his wife soon collapsed and died from what appeared to be cardiac arrest. Over the following days, Nick put on a convincing show of devastating grief. Finally, one evening after all the family members had left, he excitedly jumped on his motorcycle and secretly rode to a secluded house. This was exactly why he had poisoned his wife in the first place. His wife wasn't just much older than him, she had also given him his respectable job. She was incredibly controlling, threatening to kick him out of the company whenever he didn't obey her demands. He had grown sick of it but felt trapped with no choice but to endure it. A few months earlier, he had met Carla, who was gentle and caring. After spending time together, they had plotted this entire scheme. All they needed now was to pass the autopsy smoothly, inherit his wife's substantial fortune, and then he and Carla could finally live the life they wanted. But just then, Nick received a call from the police. His wife's body had mysteriously disappeared from the morgue. When they heard this news, both he and Carla froze in place. Had their plan somehow been exposed? When Nick arrived at the coroner's office, he learned that half an hour earlier, a security guard had frantically fled from the morgue, apparently terrified by something. Strangely, all the other surveillance cameras had been destroyed, leaving them with no way to investigate what had happened. That's when they discovered Nick's wife's body was missing. Hearing all this actually put Nick at ease. It meant their crime hadn't been discovered. The medical examiner then asked if his wife had any pre-existing conditions, which Nick denied across the board. He carefully probed whether the coroner had already concluded that his wife died of a heart attack. The medical examiner said it was very likely, and Nick visibly relaxed. His response struck others as somewhat disturbing. He seemed far too calm when discussing his wife's death. Still, this was merely suspicion. After being detained for a while, Nick grew impatient and demanded to go home immediately. Just then, the lights suddenly dimmed and the entire building lost power. An officer asked him to return to the office, but suddenly there were sounds coming from the morgue behind them. Nick followed the noise inside and discovered that an iron box had mysteriously appeared on top of his wife's morgue drawer. The box contained some of his wife's personal belongings and an empty sealed bag. Suddenly, Nick noticed an open drawer nearby. Driven by curiosity, he lit his lighter to take a look, but what he saw inside nearly scared him to death. It was the very poison bottle he had used on his wife. Before he could react, the lights came back on and Nick quickly shoved the bottle into his pocket. The police arrived moments later and found that the drawer had been pried open, while the iron box should have been inside the drawer. Nick hastily explained that he hadn't touched anything, but the officers discovered after checking their inventory that a cell phone was missing. Nick panicked even more. Following their instructions, he emptied his pockets of everything except the poison bottle, hoping to get away with it. But Jamie had already seen through his frantic behavior and immediately slammed him against the wall for a full body search. The poison bottle was quickly discovered. Jamie didn't know what it was, but the label clearly indicated it came from Nick's laboratory. Nick frantically explained that he had just picked it up from the floor, but this obviously didn't convince Jamie. Just then, Nick's phone suddenly rang. Jamie insisted he answer it in front of everyone. The call was from Carla, but before she could speak, Nick quickly pretended she was his sister and said he was cooperating with the police investigation, then hurriedly hung up. Nick then said he needed to use the restroom, and as soon as the door closed, he immediately called Carla back. Nick told Carla that someone must know what they had done and was deliberately guiding the police to suspect him, but only the two of them knew about the entire plan. Carla repeatedly assured him she had never told anyone, but then began to wonder if Nick had revealed something while talking in his sleep, or perhaps his wife had already suspected something. This possibility terrified Nick because he indeed had a habit of talking in his sleep. But for now, all he could do was stay put and carefully handle whatever came next.